Third POV. A few days had passed and Izuku had agreed to meet All Might at the beach where they would be training. Izuku changed into some workout clothes and took a small bag with drinks and energy bars so he could refresh himself when he took some breaks. After about a 30-minute jog from UA early in the morning before the students had arrived on campus, he made his way towards the beach. Once he arrived after the 30-minute run, he looked over the beach and nodded his head at what he saw. They really did let this beach go to waste with all of this trash, Izuku said out loud to no one in particular when he heard All Might's voice from behind him. Indeed, my boy. Izuku greeted him and they both looked over the trash beach together and started to talk about how he was going to be cleaning. Overall, start small and move upwards, but also do some bigger things as well. I think with your current condition you could clean this all in 5 months' time, which does include you doing other things half of the day like finishing your high school education. Nezu told me he wants you to get a teaching certificate and I am working on mine as well. I think he may have you help me teach my class since I will be teaching Heroics 101. All Might said, and Izuku nodded his head since he remembers something about that being mentioned by Nezu very late last night right before he went to sleep. Izuku though had a question about All Might's OFA. Hey, Toshi. How much is your limit right now? Izuku asked, and All Might understood the question and he was silent for a second before looking out at the sea through the small window in the trash. As it stands, I have about 6 hours total left. It would have been likely less, but I conversed as best as I could since I needed to find you no matter what. Though I can feel it slipping away. By the time you start at UA I likely will have 4 hours most likely or something like that as long as I keep conversing my energy as best as I can. All Might said, and Izuku nodded his head. Soon Izuku got to work on the trash pile as he followed along with the plan that All Might had put out for him. Overall it was a mixture of moving the garbage most of the time and then a set routine that was a bit harsher than the one Izuku was already doing. All Might had arranged for a dumpster to be placed on the street since he knew Izuku was going to make fast progress with the amount of cleanup. As such, a normal pickup truck would be wasteful in gas since he would need to make a large number of trips between the beach and the dump, so a dumpster was a far better solution and a truck would come and pick it up every afternoon since All Might didn't care about the expense. Izuku decided to ask more questions to All Might like what was his favorite thing to do in his pastime, and All Might said it was to watch old cartoon shows from long ago. A lot of cartoons now these days have me in them. I don't really want to watch myself all of the time since that is just freaky. Watching the really old cartoons from before quirks came around is quite nice. All Might said, and Izuku nodded his head. When I was still quirkless I used to watch all of those old shows and just dream of getting a quirk or figuring a way out to replicate the technology so I could become a hero as well. Ironically, I kind of got it in a similar way that Spider-Man did, but instead of being bitten I was given via blood, which honestly wasn't as bad as I thought it would be since I didn't really notice that you had done it until much later on since I was in shock at the sight before me during those times. Izuku said, and All Might chuckled and apologized for forcing the life he did on him all that time ago. Izuku waved it off. I am glad you did it. Indeed, I would have liked to be a quirkless hero, but I can do so much more with the powers I have unlocked. I can advocate for so much change far more than I could any other way. Also, would I really have a Denzawa, and a dad might to help me beat people up or come up with crazy plans? Izuku said with a smirk, and All Might rolled his eyes and shrugged. Who knows? You were likely going to do crazy stuff regardless, so I wouldn't be surprised if Nezu somehow got his hands on you with those analysis books of yours. All Might said as he felt a shiver down his back and figured Nezu knew he was talking about him somehow. While he said that, Nezu broke out into a wide smile in his office since he felt as if someone was talking in fear of him. Oh. I enjoy making the humans fear me, Nezu thought before sipping his tea and going back to work. Soon the day started to come to an end and Izuku looked over what he had accomplished. Overall there was a decent-sized dent in the trash he was working on since he was already in an extremely good physical condition to begin with, but this training on the beach would only make his muscles even more firmer and compact. They decided to call it a day as Izuku headed back to UA since the students would be off campus already, which meant they wouldn't see him. Izuku wanted to avoid getting seen by anyone, and especially the current second-year student Lemillion, who was a work-study at Sir Night-Eye's agency. Nezu had warned Izuku about him and told him to avoid the boy if he could since he might have learned something from Sir Night-Eye. But they don't know if he has or not. Izuku agreed with the assessment and agreed to avoid the second-year student if he could do so. Lemillion Akimirio Tagata had an interesting quirk called Permeation that was a weak quirk but grown into being a strong one with his fighting style. Izuku sat down on the couch after showing and changing clothing. How was the training? Nezu asked as he came up to the couch and jumped on it. Izuku shrugged a bit. It was indeed a decent workout. I can see why All Might wants me to clean it more than just it being a community service project, since it does work a lot of my less worked muscles that wouldn't get worked in a gym most of the time. I already filled the dumpster up once, so I am glad he is having it picked up once every day, or else I would overfill it, Izuku said, and Nezu nodded his head as he was glad the training and community service were being beneficial for Izuku's training. They soon started to eat dinner as Nezu asked him if he wanted to do some educational work in regards to learning to better hack. Izuku smiled and nodded his head as he quickly finished eating dinner, since he wanted to get started on those types of lessons. He was also making strong headway in the remaining portions of his high school education, since the classes were self-paced. As such, Izuku had used any free time outside of other things to eat away at the work, and he knew he could have it done in a few months, most likely, since he only spent so much time each day working on it. If he spent dedicated days on it, then he could have it done in less than a month probably, but again that would require full dedicated days with nothing else in the way for the entire time, which he didn't have right now with the other training and things going on. Months have passed since Izuku had started cleaning up the beach, and it was nearly done. However, many things have happened over the months that had passed. Firstly, Izuku had his name changed from Izuku Midoriya to Izuku Yagi, as he no longer wanted to be called Midoriya anymore. The reason he went with Yagi over Aizawa or Nezu was that Nezu really didn't have a last name and Aizawa already had partial custody. Izuku wanted All Might to be connected more to him as well, so taking his name on with permission of course was what Izuku decided to do, since no one really knows the last name Yagi except those connected to All Might himself. As such, it will help keep him protected overall. Aizawa's name would have kept him protected as well, but Izuku wanted Toshi to feel more involved with Izuku's life, since he was voted against by the past users in caring for Izuku. All Might had broken down in tears the day that Izuku had asked that, and had accepted without even thinking about it. Izuku smiled greatly that day as well. However, moving forward on the other topics as well, Izuku had accepted taking the recommendation exam from All Might, but had no intentions of revealing who recommended him, as he wanted to build up his own name before he was associated with All Might 24/7, which All Might agreed with. They had informed Nezu of this decision, who accepted it. Nezu knew Izuku would pass regardless due to his overwhelming power with his quirks and without his quirks. As such, this meant only 3 recommendation spots were open in his mind, and he's received quite a few applications from all different types of people, but he knew he did receive one from the number 2 hero endeavor for his youngest child, Shouto Todoroki. There were some others from notable families like the Ida family or Yaoyorozu family, which was a very rich family. Nezu wondered who the other 3 people would be that would conquer the recommendations exam, but shrugged since that was still a bit away. Now moving on to other things, as it is about 4 months after Izuku had been picked up from the forest, and Nezu had decided to schedule a sparring session with little rules between All Might and Izuku. Nezu wanted to see how Izuku did compare to All Might in combat, so they all gathered up at Training Ground Beta, which was a fake city recreation that they used for the entrance exams, and prepared to watch All Might and Izuku go at it before they walked out to the field. All Might decided to ask how much control Izuku had of One for All due to all of the training he had done at the beach. The people that knew about the quirk were interested as well in how much control he had gained in the short 4 months, and Izuku smiled when he was asked. When we left the forest I was at 50% plus the other aspects. Now, I sit at 65%, which means I have gained 15% in the past 4 months, which isn't surprising since I was already toned and healthy. The training on the beach is helping build of those less known muscles, which has done wonders for my control since I am spreading the quirk across all of my muscles, which includes those, Izuku said, and All Might smiled greatly as he nodded his head. Overall, Izuku had been doing an amazing job in his training and looks to be on track to have almost all of One for All under control before his first year of school, which means he would just need to focus on all other heroic aspects of his training. Soon both of them stepped out into the fake city, and Izuku right away called in the mist to condense in the area of the fight. Izuku's control and usage of the mist quirk had gotten pretty good, and he was now at the point that he could spread it out and use it within a mile radius around himself, which was honestly far more than Izuku thought he would ever need in hero work, but useful regardless if he ever needed to make a quick escape for some god-awful reason. All Might tensed when he saw the mist coming and decided to try using the air produced by his punches to try pushing most of the mist away, but the mist just kept coming back every time he did it. Quite a good job, my boy. The mist would definitely make people tense up when they see it, as it will likely become a common indicator that you are in an area the more popular you become. All Might said as he suddenly dodged to the side as Izuku came from his backside out of the mist and tried to land a punch, but All Might grabbed his arm and attempted to throw him. However, the moment All Might tried to throw him, Izuku suddenly disappeared into the mist. What? You can even do that when someone has a grip on you? All Might asked out loud, since they didn't know he could do that, since this is the first time he's been using his quirks in an actual fight. The spar back in the forest with Eraserhead had no quirks involved in their fight, so everything Izuku was doing was brand new to them. All Might heard a chuckle in the mist around him and felt a shiver go up to his spine as he saw something come from his right, and he dodged backward, but he then noticed what was coming towards him was just a knife that Izuku uses. That is when All Might received a kick to his uninjured side and got sent into a building. Izuku had forced All Might to instinctively respond to the threat of the blade and forced him back into the kick, which connected. All Might soon jumped out of the building and tried to grab Izuku, who just dodged the attack and went for a punch towards All Might, who blocked it. Your 65% is really powerful. I have to go 80% to not get pushed backward, All Might said as he powered up more and quickly slammed Izuku into the ground before he could move back into the mist. However, right as Izuku's body slammed into the ground, he had black whips come out of his wrists, and they attacked All Might, who jumped away but got grabbed by one. All Might forcibly broke free by using 100% and then charged Izuku, who had jumped into the air and was using float to stay in the air instead of coming back down. This boy is downright scary with all of these quirks backing him up. I kind of hold some pity for any of the villains that will face him, All Might thought as he did a punch upwards to attack Izuku with wind pressure. Izuku just tanked the wind pressure though and decided to pull out his short blade, and All Might was confused on why his protege was pulling that weapon out until he saw what Izuku had started to do. Izuku lifted the blade at an angle and then powered up one for all, which unknown to everyone on how he did it, but the green arcs of lighting from him moved onto the blade as well, which shocked All Might, who decided to take cover. Izuku swung the sword, and once he did it, the lighting from the quirk came off the blade and carved into the ground, wiping out a handful of buildings but making a massive scar in the ground due to the lighting and wind pressure that came off the blade. Holy super crap, All Might said as he pushed himself out of the rubble from the building he hid in. You could see All Might muscles clenching up since he got hit by the lighting a bit, so he was being affected by it as well. Though the match still wasn't over as Izuku put the blade away and quickly dropped down to All Might and landed a kick right on his crossed arms, which shoved All Might down into the ground a bit, but before All Might could react, Izuku quickly twisted his body with float and the reflex quirk and grabbed All Might and tossed him. Though Izuku was unlucky as well, since All Might grabbed Izuku as he was being tossed and held on, which brought Izuku with him flying into a building that came down after they crashed through it and into Antoher building. Both of them made their way out of the rubble, and you could see blood coming down All Might's head a bit since he had some wounds, and Izuku was exhausted since they had been fighting for about 40 minutes now. I must say, old man, that this is so exciting and we need to do this more often, Izuku said with a grin, and All Might laughed a bit since he indeed wanted to do this again as well in the future if he still had the time to do it with his form. All Might and Izuku charged towards each other and threw away all other tactics as they just entered a slugfest as they exchanged blows between each other. They were both laughing as they kept going with only their fists, and one for all backing them up. After about another 10 minutes, Izuku fell to his knees as he was breathing hard due to the extended quirk usage and fighting. Izuku hasn't really had to deal with fighting that long nor using his quirk for an hour almost, but All Might wasn't in any better condition either as he was breathing hard and looked like he would need to stop soon. It's clear that we are going to need to stop, so I guess we should go for one last punch to decide the winner, Izuku asked, and All Might nodded his head. Both of them jumped away from each other and Izuku started up float and all of his other quirks that could be used for a physical fight all at once. I am putting everything I got into this, old man, Izuku yelled as he pushed his limits and moved from 65% to 70% of one for all. All Might nodded his head and was prepared to use a 100% punch since he couldn't risk going over since it would shorten his time limit. Both of them waited for a moment to strike, and then suddenly some rubble from one of the broken buildings fell and made a noise which broke the tension between them and sent them charging at each other. Izuku was using float to help boost his speed, black whips to cover his arm to add more damaging effects, his reflexes quirk to help aim and move better, and then one for all at 70%. And the closer he got, the more he smiled, just as All Might was doing, as both of their smiles widened even more due to the thrill of the fight. However, before they collided, Izuku suddenly used the reflexes quirk and changed the trajectory of his fist to go under All Might's attack and land a blow to his stomach to the side to ensure he didn't hit the wound. Izuku had also expelled Black Whip, which forced All Might to go flying backward even more. All Might went flying across the city and landed in the wall that surrounded the training grounds. The buzzer went off, ending the spar, and Izuku quickly made his way to All Might to see how he was. Izuku was shocked when he arrived and found All Might holding his stomach and was laying on the ground. "Can you help me to recovery, girl? I think we broke some of my ribs. She is going to be pissed," All Might said with a bit of fear of the old lady. Izuku nodded his head and gently grabbed his master with the quirk and flew off towards the control room since Recovery Girl would be there. After a few minutes, you could find Recovery Girl healing All Might, who had dropped to his skinny form and looked horrible in his state. "You two need to be careful. You broke half of your ribs," Recovery Girl said as she smacked Izuku with her cane and glared at him as he apologized. All Might just laughed a bit though, which earned him some looks. "I went 100% nearly that entire time," I of course didn't go over 100% like I could if I were to perform the United States of Smash, but I lost. I lost to my successor who only has 65% under his control. Dear God, just imagine what he can do when he hits 100% with more battle experience. All Might said with a huge grin since he was proud of his protege. It was at that moment that they all realized the implications of that. The undaunted symbol of peace had just been beaten by someone who wasn't even close to their prime. The implications of that were huge, and it solidified the decision in Nezu's mind on his next steps. With that, thank you for watching this short part and see you tomorrow. Bye bye.